Hello, it's Joe Simhard here for the 23rd installment of Cults in the Occulture. Today's topic will be about flags and the cults surrounding flags. It was inspired mainly by the January 6th insurrection, where I noticed lots of banners and signs, Trump flags, QAnon flags, the American flag was prominent, and other symbols that people carried. Flag cults are common to every country. These symbols and objects are sacred to the people who carry them and fly them. They become objects of reverence. We're expected to treat our flags reverently. This is a kind of a splashy symbol of my parents' native country, Hungary, and the Hungarian flag. So I bought this at a Hungarian gathering at a club where they have an annual Hungarian feast nearby here. Anyway, so I got curious about this, the American flag and how people look at it in the hands of different people. Now you as an average American and loyal to the country and who reveres the flag, would you follow a person that was waving this flag and marching down the street, but also had swastikas tattooed on his body and belonged to something called the Aryan Nations or Proud Boys or whatever, and had a basic identity as a white supremacist? It's a question. So let's look at the swastika, which is also heavily revered in Germany and before. It goes back 10,000 years in some cultures that we have found, about 4,000 years back in the Indic cultures around the Indus Valley in India. So here we have a picture of our famous historical figure Adolf carrying his swastika flag in this book called Propaganda, The Art of Persuasion in World War II by Anthony Rhodes. Hitler inspired quite a few people with his fascism, and as well as Mussolini. One of them was a guy named William Dudley Pelley, who designed this flag. It looks something like this, an L, usually on a white or a silver background. And the group that he led was called the Silver Legion. And people commonly called it silver shirts because they wore a silver shirt with a blue tie and corduroy pants. The group or cult was announced in 1933 by Pelley, and it was dissolved in 1941. Pelley and many of the members were arrested for fascist activities in the United States for good reason. We were fighting fascism. But the group was modeled after Benito Mussolini's black shirts, and they used this L for many reasons. It meant lover, it meant loyalty to the United States, it meant liberation from materialism, and it meant the Silver Legion itself. So it had layers of meaning that would be described and explained to the group and gave it a kind of a richness for its cult, so to speak. But the swastika, where did that come from? One of the sources that you can look at in terms of the occult influence on Nazism, the best sources, it's called Black Sun. And it's by Nicholas Goodricks-Clark, Aryan Cults, Esoteric Nazism, and the Politics of Identity. Now, he gets quite deep into the sources of Nazi identity and who supported it and where it came from. But on the back cover, he's got this symbol, which was actually more important and maybe more powerful than the swastika for the inner core of Nazis. And that symbol is the Black Sun, thus the title of the book, a symbol used by esoteric Nazis in Germany and abroad since 1990, and it's taken from an inlay, 1940 to 42, on the marble floor of the Gruppenführer Hall in the Wewelsburg Castle, or Heinrich Himmler's SS Staff College near Paderborn, Germany. The design is based on a 9th century Germanic ornament. So the Germans were interested in their pagan past. They wanted to get into their identity and who they were. Early on in the 20th century, a lot of these Romantic Germans turned to Theosophy and some of its writings, which claimed to represent the ancient perennial religion or philosophy of all of mankind, and or at least was exploring what that was. So there was a magazine published there by a theosophist, Franz Hartmann, and it was called Lotus Blossom or Lotus Blüten. And anyway, their cover had the first symbol of the swastika in its, I guess, its own flag or symbol, and it looked something like this. Actually, it looked exactly like this. Here you see the swastika in a circle. The Ouroboros, the snake swallowing itself, or the symbol of cosmic rebirth. The Ankh, or the symbol of life from ancient Egypt. The Jewish Kabbalah six-pointed star. And this phrase in French, which basically means there is no religion superior to truth. So what were the Theosophists getting at with all this? Well, they were trying to get at the truth, and the truth of who we are as human beings. They also had a kind of a hierarchy, a spiritual hierarchy within the theosophical milieu that was adopted by the Germans to become a racial or an ethnic hierarchy. The Germans that were into this were called Ariosophists, which predated Nazism. They were influenced quite a bit by this guy, Franz Hartmann, who published Lotus Blossom. And Hartmann died around 1913, I think, or 12. Anyway, he was influenced quite a bit by this guy, Guido von List, who introduced Wotanism, or the worship of Odin, another name for Wotan, into the German milieu and into the proto-Nazi Aeriosophy milieu. And this is what Mr. von List looked like. He was quite a character, poet, playwright, a man who viewed himself as very important, very special. So he helped influence the use of the swastika. But what exactly did it mean? Well, it comes from the Sanskrit, su, su, and ast, su meaning good, and ast meaning to be or exist. And in most languages in Eurasia, India, swastika basically means all is well. That's it. Now, it can mean a lot of other things. It can mean the turning of the cosmos and good fortune and all of that, depending on your local interpretation. There's some indication it was found as a symbol in 13,000 BCE, or before Christ, being used there in the Ukraine. And then later in the Indus Valley, about 4,000 years ago, which is the modern use of swastika. The Nazis romanticized the swastika to identify with a master race. And they felt the Aryans that carried this symbol with them into northern India were the conquerors, were the master race of India. Now, that's not true. People came in waves. There wasn't one master race that conquered India with this particular symbol and other myths that they carried with them. So the Nazis essentially, as well as the Theosophists, misinterpreted what the Aryans were. However, it became romanticized, and we have new cults called Aryan Nations and all kinds of other groups that follow Odin and Wotan and all of that. So I was looking at the names of Odin, and because when you identify a cult, you want to identify it by name and the groups that surround it. there's a lot of cults that follow Odin under different names. So you really have to look at the name to see if it's associated with it. And in Wikipedia, I found over 250 names listed for Odin. It starts on A here with something called Alderfodor, and it goes all the way down to Brog and Brodir and Burs, and it means different things in different cultures, but it's all associated with Odin. And it ends with, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's YJUNGR, stormy or of the primal streams, and it's a name for Odin. So Odinism can come under hundreds of different names. So if you're looking for some kind of neo-Nazi group, you really have to be careful as to how it names itself, whether it's associated with that kind of thing. And, in Goodricks-Clark's book, I wanted to point out something here that's interesting. We have the Aryan Nations, which has this one poster, Aryans Awake, and of course they're in their battle motif in this particular image, fighting for the master race. We also have the Reverend William Butler presiding over a wedding in the Aryan Nations compound at Hayden Lake, Idaho in 1998. So that's what an Aryan Nations wedding might look like. You'll see the Christian cross, the Aryan Nations symbol in the middle, and you see Nazi symbols in the stage there. You'll also see, let me see if I can find this, an earlier form of the Nazi Party led by George Lincoln Rockwell addresses a rally in Chicago in 1966 in this particular photo, and you see it pretty blatantly mentions white power, and the Nazi flag is flown. These days, the neo-Nazis and white supremacists don't broadcast the swastika because it's become a target, immediately attracting a lot of criticism. So they disguise themselves under new names and new symbols. And like I said, there's 250 ways to name Odin and call your group something that's related to that name. But back to the swastika. It still has its benign cult following in India and Tibet, and even in the West, there's been some cultures that have used some version of the swastika. So in 2008, at the Second Hindu-Jewish Leadership Summit, a resolution formally recognized the long positive history of the swastika. Swastika is an ancient and greatly auspicious symbol of the Hindu tradition, it said. It is inscribed on Hindu temples, ritual altars, entrances, and even account books. A distorted version of this sacred symbol was misappropriated by the Third Reich in Germany and abused as an emblem under which heinous crimes were perpetrated against humanity, particularly the Jewish people. The participants recognized that this symbol is and has been sacred to Hindus for millennia, long before its misappropriation. So again, that was the Hindu-Jewish Leadership Summit that formally announced that in 2008. So when we look at this flag, we actually have to look at who's carrying it and why, and be very careful about our reverence for it. So I'd like to leave it at that, something to think about. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.